Hello there. This is Mr. Databrain, and hold on to your seat as this going to be different. As any posthumous interview will certainly be controversial. Having said this, there is only one precondition to this discussion, and that is violence is never the solution. Mr. Stack, your final act as a 53-year-old spiritual being on a physical trip was to turn an airplane into a weapon. With this weapon, you virtually destroyed a building and attempted to take the lives of 200+ innocent fellow Americans. In this criminal act, you killed yourself and murdered one other human being, Mr. Vernon Hunter, age 67, may God rest his soul. A warning to our viewers, there will be some profanity. Mr. Stack, why did you commit an act of premeditated murder with the intent to kill hundreds?
Why did this have to happen? The simple truth is that it is complicated and has been coming for a long time. The writing process, started many months ago, was intended to be therapy in the face of the looming realization that there isn't enough therapy in the world that can fix what is really broken. Needless to say, this rant could fill volumes with example after example, if I would let it. I find the process of writing it frustrating, tedious, and probably pointless, especially given my gross inability to gracefully articulate my thoughts in light of the storm raging in my head. Exactly what is therapeutic about the time, not sure, but desperate times call for desperate measures.
You speak of desperate times and desperate measures, please explain.
We are all taught as children that without laws there would be no society, only anarchy. Sadly, starting at early ages we in this country have been brainwashed to believe that, in return for our dedication and service, our government stands for justice for all. We are further brainwashed to believe that there is freedom in this place, and that we should be ready to lay our lives down for the noble principles represented by its founding fathers. Remember, one of these was no taxation without representation. I have spent the total years of my adulthood unlearning that crap from only a few years of my childhood. These days anyone who really stands up for that principle is promptly labeled a crackpot, traitor and worse.
Brainwashing? Even if this is so, it does not begin to clarify your actions.
While very few working people would say they haven't had their fair share of taxes, as can I, in my lifetime I can say with a great degree of certainty that there has never been a politician cast a vote on any matter with the likes of me or my interests in mind. Nor, for that matter, are they the least bit interested in me or anything I have to say. Why is it that a handful of thugs and plunderers can commit unthinkable atrocities, and in the case of the GM executives, for scores of years, and when it's time for their gravy train to crash under the weight of their gluttony and overwhelming stupidity, the force of the full federal government has no difficulty coming to their aid within days if not hours? Yet at the same time, the joke we call the American medical system, including the drug and insurance companies, are murdering tens of thousands of people a year, and stealing from the corpses and victims they cripple, and this country's leaders don't see this as important as bailing out a few of their vile, rich cronies. Yet, the political representatives, thieves, liars, and self-serving scumbags, is far more accurate, have endless time to sit around for year after year and debate the state of the terrible healthcare problem. It's clear they see no crisis, as long as the dead people don't get in the way of their corporate profits rolling in.
Mr. Stack, I hear the anger in your words. However,
and justice? You've got to be kidding. How can any rational individual explain that white elephant conundrum in the middle of our tax system, and, indeed, our entire legal system? Here we have a system that is, by far, too complicated for the brightest of the master scholars to understand. Yet, it mercilessly holds accountable its victims, claiming that they are responsible for fully complying with laws not even the experts understand. The law requires a signature on the bottom of a tax filing, yet no one can say truthfully that they understand what they are signing. If that's not duress, then what is? If this is not the measure of a totalitarian regime, nothing is.
I'm lost. You have jumped from manufacturing to healthcare, politicians, and now taxes.
How did I get here? My introduction to the real American nightmare starts back in the early '80s. Unfortunately, after more than 16 years of school, somewhere along the line I picked up the absurd pompous notion that I could read and understand plain English. Some friends introduced me to a group of people who were having tax code readings and discussions. In particular, zeroed in on a section relating to the wonderful exemptions that make institutions like the vulgar, corrupt Catholic Church so incredibly wealthy. We carefully studied the law, with the help of some of the best, high-paid, experienced tax lawyers in the business, and then began to do exactly what the big boys were doing, except that we weren't stealing from our congregation, or lying to the government about our massive profits in the name of God. We took a great deal of care to make it all visible, following all of the rules, exactly the way the law said it was to be done. The intent of this exercise and our efforts was to bring about a much-needed re-evaluation of the laws that allow the monsters of organized religion to make such a mockery of people who earn an honest living. However, this is where I learned that there are two interpretations for every law, one for the very rich and one for the rest of us. Oh, and the monsters are the very ones making and enforcing the laws. The Inquisition is still alive and well today in this country.
Now, you've moved on to religion? You're still losing me. Mr. Stack, I think we need more background. Please continue.
That little lesson in patriotism cost me $40,000 plus 10 years of my life, and set my retirement plans back to zero. It made me realize for the first time that I live in a country with an ideology that is based on a total and complete lie. It also made me realize not only how naive I had been, but also the incredible stupidity of the American public, that they buy, hook, line, and sinker, the crap about their freedom, and that they continue to do so with eyes closed in the face of overwhelming evidence and all that keeps happening in front of them. Before even having to make a shaky recovery from the sting of the first lesson on what justice really means in this country, around 1984, after making my way through engineering school and still another 5 years of paying my dues, I felt I finally had to take a chance of launching my dream of becoming an independent engineer. On the subjects of engineers and dreams of independence, I should digress somewhat to say that I'm sure that I inherited the fascination for creative problem solving from my father. I realized this at a very young age. The significance of independence, however, came much later during my early years of college, at the age of 18 or 19, when I was living on my own as a student in an apartment in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My neighbor was an elderly retired woman, 80 plus, seemed ancient to me at that age, who was the widowed wife of a retired steel worker. Her husband had worked all his life in the steel mills of central Pennsylvania with promises from big business and the union that, for his 30 years of service, he would have a pension and medical care to look forward to in his retirement. Instead, he was one of the thousands who got nothing because the incompetent mill management and corrupt union, not to mention the government, raided their pension funds and stole their retirement. All she had was Social Security to live on. In retrospect, the situation was laughable, because here I was living on peanut butter and bread, or Ritz crackers, when I could afford to splurge, for months at a time. When I got to know this poor figure, and heard her story, I felt worse for her plight than for my own. After all, I thought I had everything in front of me. I was genuinely appalled at one point, as we exchanged stories and commiserated with each other over our situations, when she in her grandmotherly fashion tried to convince me that I would be healthier eating cat food, like her, rather than trying to get all my substance from peanut butter and bread. I couldn't quite go there, but the impression was made. I decided that I didn't trust big business to take care of me, and that I would take responsibility for my own future and myself.